Hello, team, and welcome back to the Process Podcast. Marcus, welcome to the Process Podcast. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. I like the name of the podcast.
Thank you. What do you like about the name about the podcast?
Process is so ingrained in everything that I do. It's just how I built the backbone of my career, life. Everything is process oriented. I see that there's an evolution of process in life. So I just like the word.
Would you say that you've always been process orientated? Was there a time in life where maybe you're a bit more outcome orientated?
I mean, with that said, don't get me wrong, I'm still very. I have a lot of outcome. I'm outcome oriented in certain ways, and I think the I fight the constant juggle of those two things. But in terms of you know somebody who's committed to the process, I don't always love the process. Like people say, you got to love the journey. That's all about loving the journey. It's like I also see process as just like a means to an end too. It's like if you don't have a good process in place, you can't reach outcomes. And so I might still be focused on an outcome, but the process, I still see the value in having a day by day, hour by hour kind of solution to it. So I don't know. Yeah, I think the things that I fell in love with the most, and certainly my career, what I do now, and sport, athlete, we'll talk about those things. It was certainly the process that made me the most passionate. And if we go to my origin stories of becoming a coach and being into fitness, it was like I played a lot of sports as a young kid, but when I realized I didn't love the sports, I loved the process of training for the sports. I loved being in shape. I was like, oh, I'm just going to go do more of that, which was fitness.
At what point? At what point did you realize it was a training process more so than actual competitive side of the sport that you loved? Because it's funny. I'm exactly the same. Very similar story.
Yeah,
When was it for you?
I think I had an awareness of it in high school. I started to really love the training process, but I was also competing in high school at a level where I was very connected to the outcomes and to the competitive. Like I was the starting, player, like the starting goalkeeper in soccer, and I was on competitive teams that were doing well. So there was sort of some of that positive feedback of like, hey, we're winning, we're getting attention. And then I fast forward to college where I was not the first string or the second string. I was a deep bench warmer, as they like to say. And all that glory was not on me. And the game itself, I started to lose I was like, I don't even love the game. The only reason I'm still doing this is because the training is epic. And so that really solidified it for me in college, I would say. And that's when I, changed focus for sure.
All right. Well, I think we jumped the gun there massively. So I think
We did.
introduction is in order. Marcus, so tell us who you are. What do you do?
Yeah, I'm a health and fitness coach, husband, and a father of two young daughters.
That I always love hearing people's introductions because it's always interesting to
Yeah.
see which avenue people take. Tell us
Yeah.
about your career. Obviously, I think a lot of people know you for probably a couple of things. First and foremost, which is when I first knew about you, was as a CrossFit Games athlete.
Mm-hmm.
2013 was the first CrossFit Games I ever went to, and I really didn't know anything about the sport. We kind of stumbled across Carson and decided to go watch this crazy CrossFit thing. And we literally thought it was like
You said 13, 2013.
2013. Yeah. Was that your first year competing?
That was my first year as an
As an individual.
individual competition. Yeah, I'd been
That's
there
right.
3 years before that, so that was my fourth year at Carson.
That's right. Yeah, we thought so. Rugby was my background, so we thought that the CrossFit Games would just be like, honestly, a massive rugby piss up. So it was going to be a weekend of like alcohol, booze, and partying. And we walked into the gates, and straight away, obviously, no one had a shirt on, and everyone was ripped out of their mind, and no one was drinking. So we sat down with like a pint each, and sat in like the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the stands, and we were honestly like, this is not what we should be doing here. So we kind of, I didn't even think we finished that first pint, and we just kind of like gotten really into fitness. So I guess going back to your story, a lot of people will know you as a CrossFit Games athlete. And then I think more recently, the work that you've done with functional bodybuilding, and what a massive splash you've had on the world there. So perhaps could you take us into both of those parts of you in your life?
Yeah, certainly. I got started in a career of fitness coaching. That was my 2009. I got my first job as a coach. And I was committed to just being the best. I wanted to develop my career as a coach. There's a story that happened before that, which just, to summarize and to make it really simple, I left a career in medicine to focus on being a coach. And I was very, very committed to making that work, because it was, by many people's estimations, was a mistake, or, why would you leave one thing that was so reputable to go do something that not a lot of people had a lot of, there wasn't a lot of status in coaching. So anyway, I was very committed to building my career as a coach. I started out essentially in a CrossFit gym. And because that was where the most clients and customers were going. So customer acquisition was, I didn't know these terms at the time. I'm a bit more savvy with business, not by no means an expert, but we were acquiring customers for nothing, for free, because we had a name on the door. These customers were eager to learn how to lift weights and discuss nutrition principles like paleo, which to me was like, hell yeah, like give me all these people. I want to coach them up and learn, become a better professional. So it was a great time. And that was what I was focused on. And along the way, I was also passionate about fitness myself. I was an athlete, and CrossFit just totally captivated my attention, my enthusiasm for fitness. And so I just started doing CrossFit with the gym, the daily WOD, and that turned into doing 2 WODs a day. And then it turned into, getting an invitation to be on the competitive team because I was good. And so my competitive fitness career as a CrossFitter was secondary to being a professional coach. And it was simply because I loved it. I was good at it. And I got kind of the invitation to come and do it. And so in 2010, I did my first competition in CrossFit. And within a year, within 6 months from doing my first competition, I competed at the CrossFit Games on an affiliate team. And then every year thereafter for the next 7 years, essentially. So that was my competitive CrossFit career. And then when I retired from competing in CrossFit, it was also when I sold my gym. I had a CrossFit gym, sold my shares of that gym back to my partners, and went out on my own to start my own coaching business. That was going to be heavily inspired by my time in CrossFit, but I also wanted to bring some of my former training, education principles, and just really sort of be, CrossFit was like you're either in, you're out for many years. And I recognized the value of CrossFit, but I also recognized the value of other training methodologies. And I was like, look, I want to be in a brand, in a place, in a business that I can create where I can incorporate all of these things and not have to really just like fly the flag of CrossFit only. Even though I loved it, I just was like, I want to be able to marry a lot of different principles together. And I'm no longer a competitor in this sport. So my training methods personally needed to change to reflect what training for kind of a more balanced life moving forward would look like. Because training to be a competitive elite CrossFitter is not balanced and suitable for, a life that is going to involve career and family and, doing lots of other endeavors. It's a very one-dimensionally focused approach for a sport where you're trying to win.
Can I interrupt you there real quick, Marcus?
Because I think of course.
I've heard your story, and I remember watching your story because I think your last years in CrossFit, I believe, were like around the grid time. Was that right? Where
That's
a lot
correct,
of guys, a lot of guys and girls were doing the CrossFit season, and technically the off season were doing this crazy sport grid.
Yeah.
And then basically bouncing straight back into the season. I believe it was around here that was kind of where you decided to, I guess, hang up. You didn't wear boots in CrossFit, but yeah,
Yeah.
retire from CrossFit. Is that right?
Hang up the knee sleeves,
Hang up the knee
dry,
sleeves and the wrist
dry
straps
up the
and the
knee
thumb
sleeves.
tape.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's correct.
so what was it? What was the catalyst that made you decide, okay, enough's enough?
Um, Put fairly simply, it was I knew my time was up. Like I didn't have more to give. And that's, we could unpack that more, but I wasn't like I hadn't peaked completely as an athlete, but I was pretty high up there. I was 31. I got in 12th at the CrossFit Games. I had poured everything I had into that for the past 7 years. And I did all of that for the majority of that time. I did that with very low obligations and responsibilities outside. I mean, yes, I was trying to become a great coach and I was trying to build a business that was my CrossFit gym. But I did all of that kind of, I don't want to say secondarily, but like in tandem with the CrossFit career. And the CrossFit career was helping those other things essentially. But I wasn't like I wasn't evolving as a coach and I wasn't becoming a better business owner and everything was taking a back seat. And now I was like, and I was single, well, not single, but like I refer to my years of dating my wife as our single years, even though we were a couple. It was more just like we weren't married, we didn't have kids. It was like the pre-kid life, which was, luxurious when it came to time. I had a lot of time to invest. So, in 2016, I just peaked. I'd reached this pinnacle of my career. I had poured everything I had into something. I got 12th at the games, got a grid league championship. My wife was pregnant. We had just gotten married. We just bought a house. Like, things were going to change in 2017 to the tune of, a new infant, like a business that I was on my own to try and now start building. Like, now I was going to build the business that was going to be my, not legacy, but like this is the next 10, 15 years of my life. Like I need something that's very stable and could provide and that I could feel proud of and that could help people. And I was starting over. So I wasn't able to go and be like, okay, now I'm going to ramp it up even more and train more and get top 10. It's like it was good. If anything, it was going to become exponentially harder to just achieve the same amount of training and fitness. I kept a little thread of possibility in the back of my mind, like, okay, maybe I could keep doing this thing. And so I hung in there and I kept training. And, I first had to heal myself from like a pretty exhaustive 2016 and a lot of injuries. But I was like, okay, maybe I could do this again. And I found out very quickly that I could not. And I decided to just really say, hey, you know what? I did this thing that was very special for many years. I was able to put all the energy I wanted to into it. I never had an excuse like, I don't have time to do this. I can't do enough training. I can't eat the right way. I can't get enough sleep. I had no excuses. It was on me to just be the best I could be and come face to face with the demons of, what it looks like to put yourself out there and try and win on a big stage and try and compete on a big stage. And now I had all the excuses coming and I was like, gosh, this is going to be hard. And I don't know if I want to do it a different way. And I'd rather pour all my heart and soul into the next chapter, which is family and building my own business. And I'll keep the athlete hat on, part-time. And I didn't know what it would look like.
I mean, you just alluded to the idea of like competing and putting in the hard work to win. Was there ever a part of you that was like, okay, well, because your individual years, you kind of rose through the ranks, and I guess your last year was your highest placing at the games. Was there ever like, I just want to get back to the games. It doesn't matter about placing. I know that the output, the work, the amount of work I put into it is going to be less, but that doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? Or was it just an undeniable, no, you know what? The goal, if you cannot get better, why continue with it? Because I guess,
yeah,
there's a lot of parallels to people in just CrossFit training methodology for life, right? They realize
sure.
that they can't, other life stresses become too high that they can't put in the same amount to their training. And that's maybe where they actually switch to different methodology or something completely different altogether. So what
Well,
told
perhaps that's my story. I mean,
Hmm.
I switched to a different methodology in a way. I mean, what I do today is still very much rooted in the principles of CrossFit, but the definition of CrossFit as it's taught in the level 1 certification or certificate course is not what I practice today. I'm not doing high intensity across broad time and modal domains with the goal of improving performance in the metrics that they like when I go do a hypertrophy session, that's not you know me trying to max power output across any time domain. It's different. So but yeah, I understand what you're saying in that, like, just doing it to do it. Like, I want to just get back to the games. Like, every year it was like getting back to the games was the goal, right? I mean, but the process that I had put in place to get to the games every year, the training, like, it was so regimented and dialed and detailed, and every year it evolved and got more detailed and more dialed, that's the process that I used to achieve the results that I achieved. And if I kept putting in the time as I showed for years, I would continue to climb the ranks and get better because I had yet to, like, reach my potential. And it was in 2017 where it was like, I can't do that process anymore. I can't follow that process. I could put the hours in, but then there's an emotional and a mental and a physical stress that's happening outside of training that is unlike anything I've ever dealt with in the past. I never had to go home to a crying baby all night. Like, I could put in the same 3 hours a day of training or 2.5 hours a day of training, but I never had disrupted sleep. I never had to, like, worry about waking up and having some other human be my priority. Like, I was the priority. I woke up, what I got to eat today? When am I going to get to the gym? When's my schedule going to be? When's this? Like, yeah, I had a girlfriend and a fiance that I cared about and I sacrificed some things for, but not to this extent. So it just meant that I had to change the goal was no longer the games. The goal was, how do I be a lifelong athlete going forward from here, which is what many people come into. And when I switched from, being driven by the points and the placements, like, just competing in the sport and getting out on the competition floor, like, I actually didn't go to the games thinking I would win ever. I never win. And I hated when the top athletes would say, why would you even come if you didn't think you could win? I was like, because I'm a fucking realist. Like, I'm not as fit as Matt Fraser. Like, I'm not going to beat him. So, and no, neither are you. So why would you show up? Like, don't be, like, you can believe in yourself and you can believe in yourself to go and give your best. But, hey, like, I'm not 6'8". I'm not going to dunk over Jordan. Like, it's not happening. Like, um, anyhow, it was certainly always the goal to get there and to go and place my best. And that the point of going and competing, that always brought out the best in me. It always pushed me to my absolute limit. Like, it didn't mean that, like, I would, like, by not trying to win the games, it didn't make me push less. It was like I needed to give everything I had to just get to the games and to be in the conversation. And that brought about mental and emotional anxiety and stress and fear, and those were powerful motivators back in the day to push through the pain of training. And I got to explore what it meant, what it looked like for me to do that for a period of time, which was wonderful. And I learned so much about myself, and it was very self-serving in a lot of ways. And I tried to take what I learned through that process and channel it through my coaching and through my career and through, you know, building a platform where people would pay attention and hopefully learn something and be better as a result of it. So, again, it's like when that was clearly not available to me anymore, or I didn't feel like it was going to be available to me, I was like, okay, time to hang up the knee sleeves.
What were those fears and anxieties as a competitive athlete?
Oh, I'm gonna, I mean, the fear was maybe planted early, which was I'm going to show up and not be capable of handling the physical demands of this thing that were going to come out of the hopper, whatever and that I would, that my best or my, like, the the whole combination of my abilities, physical, mental, and emotional, on a given day, I would not be able to perform at my best, and that my best uh, might not land me in the strata of where the expectations were that I would fall. People wanted Marcus to be in. I mean, at some point, in the regional, era, the open happens. It's like Marcus's name should be in the top three. Like, why? In NorCal, like, I didn't see his name. He must have, he must have fallen off. He must have broke a leg. Like, why didn't he win the thing? And that was, that felt like a lot of pressure that I put on myself to be like, yeah, it's the open. Like, this isn't even regionals. Like, I just need to get top. People are like, you just need to get top 40. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I need to get top 3 because that's how good I am. I know I am. And it's about whether I can show up on the given day and some weakness or some hole in my game is going to be exposed, or I'm going to feel so much pressure that I'm going to hyperventilate. I'm not going to have my breathing controlled. I'm not going to be able to get as many reps. And that was profoundly stressful. And it was that way for years. And, that was part of also the reason why, when it came to kind of measuring whether I can do this ongoing, it was like, oh my God, like, the physical stress I could handle, but the emotional and the mental stress of competing next to the emotional and mental stress of trying to be a parent or do the other stuff, like, yikes, that was too much. And you hear it in some other competitors, like Rich Froning. He's a great example. He's like, I'm not going team because I can't do well in individual anymore. I'm going team because it's going to be like, the mental stress is going to be much less. Not because it's easier physically, because mentally and emotionally it's easier. And so that to me is like, yeah, the best in the world makes that choice because he recognizes that there's a vast difference in being in that individual spotlight where the pressure is on you and their expectations are high, like, and then moving into something else. And, that definitely is not spoken about enough amongst top competitors, or at least it wasn't at that time. But I sure as hell knew it. And I was like, yeah, this is too much on the psyche, to continue with these other responsibilities showing up in my life.
Yeah, I think, when you look at the top guys and girls in the sport and you look statistically at what each person is capable of, when you look at a 2K row time, back squat, a front squat, clean, like, there isn't that much separating the athlete.
No, there is not.
And I do think, totally right, the unspoken mental battle of high level competition, even yourself saying that the goal wasn't to go in and win, and winning wasn't what was going to define success, yet there is still all the fear and anxiety about expectations from others, what people may think of you if you don't perform a certain way. Would you say that you, looking back on your career as an athlete, and maybe this even goes back to your college football days in goal, would you say you were able to unlock your highest potential performance, or would you say that your mental side would let you down?
I would say closer to the end of my career in any sport, the physical and mental, like, limitations, or that I had, sort of were like on a level playing field. I would say with a new sport, I don't even know if I want to make a blanket statement, but certainly there was, like, I had to put in the work physically to get to a place, in CrossFit where I could be competitive for 4 days in a row. That was the thing. It was like, and you see that amongst top competitors who have great 2K row times and max lifts, and they have great Fran time. oftentimes there's a mental component to how they compete at weekend and regionals, but there's also the physical uh, component of they're not trained for a 3 or 4 day competition, and they haven't built up that characteristic. So I needed to time for that to get there, and I also needed time of putting in the physical reps to see my physical performance year after year after year get better, stronger, and more consistent, to be like, oh yes, I believe in myself enough that I can do this. I know I can go out here and, you know, and then there's like the actual mental approach to a given competition, which was like, if the first workout of the CrossFit Games is Fran, or sorry, something like overhead squats and pull-ups, which I always did well in, and I get a second place on the first event, or a first place on the first event, that sets me up in a much different mindset as, you know, the swim event, which I'd always get close to dead last. And so I was having to learn how to battle back from typically a poor start at the CrossFit Games, because it didn't favor my strengths. Those events typically did not, as they used to program them. And so that was something I had to develop, you know, and the only way I was developing that was going to the games. So it's like, well, the first games didn't go so well. The second games, it went a little bit better. The third games, I managed to mentally stay in it, you know, long enough to bounce out of the hole.
Well, staying on the topic of mindset, then transitioning out of the sport. You know, I guess so much of your identity at this point in time has been about Marcus the athlete. Mm-hmm. And then now, I guess, no longer being Marcus the athlete and now being Marcus the family man and the business owner. What was that transition like? Was there any, I don't know, I guess like loss of self-worth, questioning your identity, you know, like a transitional process?
There was a little bit of, I would say no, not in that. I don't know. Yes and no. I mean, when my first daughter was born and I was running a business that was my own, that became like a very, I mean, there was a very real and new stressful, you know, problem in front of me to solve, which I became hyper focused on. Like it was like I didn't care about my identity as like an athlete, or what would people think about me, and, you know, who am I? It's like, it was just like fight or flight, you know, just really now trying to adjust to a new way of life. I had some fear that not being in the competitive spotlight would potentially negatively impact my business, because those were so closely connected for so many years. You know, at the time, my primary source, my only source of income was personal coaching, mostly remote online coaching to other CrossFitters who sought me out for coaching because of my success as a CrossFitter. So, yeah. Hey, you know, like, I'm not that CrossFit competitor anymore. Do I still have a business? But that didn't, you know, let's see, that didn't seem to hold true. I seem to be able to keep transitioning kind of my coach image and build my coaching brand much more, because I think it was because in the absence of competing, I could put more energy towards it, you know, which I didn't ever really consider. I was like, oh, I've kind of just been, I haven't really been trying to build my coaching brand. I've just been sort of a coach by association to the athlete. So here I am actually getting to focus on it and educate people more, and actually spend time like giving value to customers through my content and through my education. And they love that. And then probably, yeah, I mean, there was some, and then there was probably about a year to a year and a half where I still held out this possibility of maybe returning to the games or returning to competitive life after I had gotten through this like very turbulent early stage of parenting and figuring things out. I was like, oh, well, maybe I could come back and maybe I could have a comeback. And then when that comeback didn't seem feasible, I was like, well, I'm 33. I'm be 35 in 2 years. I could make it a master's comeback. So I kind of just like was holding on to this thing out there, which I didn't talk about that much. And it was just occupying space in my own head. It was like, and I would like train more than I needed to be training for my lifestyle. And I was still kind of hanging on to something that I remember when I officially was like, I'm done. Like I can let that go. I hired a coach for about 4 months to kind of prep me for the my first Masters Open, and it was like a pretty good 4 months of training. But in about month three, I was just like, I don't even really want to be doing this. Like this isn't lighting me up like it used to. I don't feel that. Like he came and visited me and we did like a simulation weekend of like or 2 days of competitive workouts. And I did good, really good. I was in great shape. I think I snatched like 285 and did some ridiculous, some crazy hard, conditioning pieces. And I was like, okay. And I was like, that sucked. I didn't like that. It seemed that was all I was thinking about all week. And I don't really want to do that. Like it's not lighting me up in a way that I think is valuable. And I was feeling so inspired by my business in functional bodybuilding. And then kind of now working out, like having a second child and having a healthy balance at home. Like I don't need this thing. Like, what am I gonna do? Go and like, I don't know. And it also, I got to be fair. Like, the masters competitive scene in CrossFit is not nearly as like, there's not a lot of fanfare around it. So it didn't exactly plug me back into that feeling of like, oh wow, there's like a really strong community out there that's pulling for me. It was just like, I'm just doing this for myself. Clearly, I'm doing this for myself, and I don't even really need it, and I don't want to be doing it that much. So, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. And so that was when I was like, yeah, I needed to maybe explore what it was like to kind of dip my toe back in the competitive arena, which was just training for a few months to like get back into the process, into the rhythm, to realize like, no, I don't want to do this. This is not for me.
And I think that's so important though, isn't it? Like there's no greater teacher than experience sometimes. Sometimes when
Yeah,
you have
certainly.
those question marks, you sometimes just got to try it and do it, and it'll maybe tell
Yeah.
you if it's the right thing to do or not. And then I'm thinking about, I'm trying to put myself into your shoes now. So you're finishing your competitive years, you're still working with competitive athletes, but then
Mm-hmm.
I mean you were pretty much, I mean, would you say you were I'm going to say that you were the person that coined the term functional bodybuilding. And I would say, would you say?
Yeah, I'm gonna. Yeah, I have documentation to back that up.
And I honestly think, Mark, it's a complete side tangent away from your story. Like, I actually think you going down that route, like, gave a whole new dimension to CrossFit as a training methodology. Because
I agree.
yeah,
And for a lot of individuals, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, I think around that time, there was still the stigma that CrossFitters don't do hypertrophy. They don't do structural balance work. They don't do single limb training. And you kind of made it acceptable and cool to do that.
Yeah.
And for it to actually have a place in even competitive CrossFit, like that it can be something that's incorporated into things like off seasons or, deload periods, or even a part of like a structured training cycle. And I actually think in the same way that Kelly Starrett, I think, kind of saved CrossFit with all the mobility work in those days. You kind of saved CrossFit in many ways by bringing functional bodybuilding into training methodology, talking about it, making it cool, and people wanting to incorporate it. But I'm just thinking, at that time when you're working with competitive people, and then you start going down the route of functional bodybuilding, was there like another identity crisis there? Because suddenly now you're not the competitive guy anymore, and your focus is becoming more about health and lifestyle and living long and prospering. Was there another crossroads there for you?
Um, no, and I think the reason why was that I didn't just shift to like, okay, one day I'm coaching people to do power cleans and burpees, and the next day I want to go and try something different. It was, I used a way of training that was different than what I'd done in the past to heal myself. Like I was broken at the end of 2016 in a way that, everyone that finishes a CrossFit Games and a CrossFit Games season is often banged up and needs a little recharge. But this was unlike anything I'd experienced in the 7 years prior. And it had me questioning at times, like, I might not never be the same. I might need some surgeries to like fix some of these pains that I have. And by incorporating functional bodybuilding for myself and actually like, okay, let's do this for real. I got to really work on healing myself. I experienced the most profound comeback of my life, and that was powerful. And so I was like, I gotta, and then, like you said, coining the term functional bodybuilding, it happened extremely organically, right? I was just posting on social media all of this training that I was doing that was different, and my audience was eating it up and wanting more. And I recall one day there's a post, I think it was like November or October 2016. I had just wrapped up a workout and I'm posting the content to Instagram and I'm writing the caption. And I had done, I forget the movements exactly, but I had gotten this like crazy, ridiculous pump, like an old school bodybuilding pump. But in the same session, I had done, burpee box jump overs and some toes to bar or something like that. So it was like functional training and bodybuilding. And I was like, today was like functional bodybuilding, hashtag functional bodybuilding. And I wrote about that. I said, it felt like this, so I'm calling it functional bodybuilding. And I had gone like after that, after people resonated with the term, I did some digging on the internet to see like, okay, well, is somebody using this thing? And at the time, a functional bodybuilding search on Google kicked back one guy who owned the URL functionalbodybuilding.com, who was a trainer who had been kind of like a bodybuilder, but done some functional movements. And he wasn't like using it and he wasn't posting anything. It was like a dormant site that hadn't been touched in a long time. There was an article written on T Nation, written, I think, by, it could have even been like Polikin or somebody. And they worked in the idea of functional bodybuilding, which was more of like an article that was talking about stop doing partial range of motion and start doing full range of motion in your bodybuilding routines. Make the movements more functional by actually squatting ass to grass, not doing quarter squats, etc. So it wasn't the same concept that I was talking about here, but the term had been out there. And that was it. There was like one social media handle, which was the same guy I talked about, and nobody was really mentioning it. So that was kind of, again, like me not just coining a term, but like putting a name to what I was doing that people were resonating with. And that's something that in coaching and in business, especially in the fitness coaching business, it's like, don't try and go do something new. Like, do your thing that you believe in and let the audience and your customers dictate whether it's actually good or not. Like, like they're going to tell you if this makes sense, if this is something that they resonate with, either through their time, money, or attention, one of those things. And I was getting a lot of attention. People were dedicating a lot of time to watching my content, and they were wanting to pay me money. Give me something I can buy. Okay, here's a 12-week templated functional bodybuilding program. Boom, people buying it. Oh shit, they bought it. I didn't know that was going to sell at all. Like somebody talked me into doing that. I didn't even want to do that. And then they bought it the next time. More people bought it. So it's like, okay, all this stuff is happening. Now functional bodybuilding is a thing. And I've heard that over the years that a lot of coaches really felt a deep sense of gratitude to me for making this thing acceptable in the CrossFit space. And really, I think I really, I appreciate the kind words that you just shared. And that's one of the best compliments I've ever received. And I received a similar compliment from a coach that I look up to a lot in the space, who's Max Elhaj, who runs Training Think Tank. And I spoke to him recently after years of not being in touch. And he was like, I just want to say, like, you really did something special for the CrossFit, community when you started to make this thing more like acceptable. And to see over the years, periodically, it's been years since this has happened, but certainly in 2017, 2018, 2019, I'd get like a tag from some random top CrossFitter who was doing some functional bodybuilding, and they tag me in there. Oh, and I'd just be like, oh, I had no idea. Sarah Sigmund's daughter's doing some functional bodybuilding, or someone's doing these things. And I'm like, damn, that's so cool. Like, this was not meant to be the methodology for competitive CrossFitters, and but it has application to a lot of different, really anybody, but a lot of different people. And what started out as like, this is the method for people who are burnt out on CrossFit. Now it's like, this is a method for people that want to do CrossFit and want to do it for a long time. You don't have to be broken and burnt out. You do it this way, you might do it a little longer than if you just jump right into high intensity, training every single day.
When did you make that transition to go from your individual coaching to then, I guess, writing like 12-week plans and then being like, all right, I'm going to go all in with this? Yeah.
When right. Yeah. Well, it was a multi-step process, but the original, the triggering event was outreach, kind of like a cold call from somebody was sort of a marketer / online program, developer. So somebody who's a local woman who is now my business partner. We've been in business for 6 years together. She kind of pitched me. She sort of like she was starting CrossFit at a local facility. Her coach at the gym, that taught her classes, was one of my clients. And so she started to hear about me through my client. She started to look me up, and she was getting totally into the whole CrossFit thing. And she's like, oh, okay, here's a local guy he's got a pretty good audience, like on social media, maybe like 60, 70,000 followers, which at the time in 2016 or 17 was pretty big for a fitness person. And then it was like, okay, well, I'm looking at his website, I'm looking at his stuff. Like, he seems kind of disorganized. Like, he's not organized. Like, he doesn't have much going on here, and I could help this guy. And so she kind of pitched me like, I could help you. Let's write a program. And I was like, well, I don't really want a program, but I could really use like a better website, and I could really use these things. Can you do any of that stuff? And she's like, yeah, I can do all that stuff. And so she essentially she said, I'll do all those things for you, but you need to let me start capturing people's emails and create like a list for you. Start an email list, which I was like, whatever. Okay, that's fine. Like, I don't know why that's going to be useful, but let's go for it. And so that's when we started to like kind of create a captive audience with, an email list. And she encouraged me to write these weekly articles that I would send out to people, and what I was doing with training and some concepts of functional bodybuilding. They were very skewed towards the CrossFit audience, people that were listening to what we're doing. And then eventually she was like, let's write a program. I know you're into individual coaching, but you clearly have, and it was clear to me too, there were more people that wanted my service that I could possibly handle from an individual coaching perspective. And they weren't necessarily wanting to pay my $300 plus rates. They wanted something a little bit lower barrier to entry. And so for that reason, I was like, okay, let's just write this thing, but I'm not going to write a subscription thing where it's like ongoing forever. I'm just going to give them a sample of what this training looks like. It's going to be 12 weeks. I think that's a sufficient amount of time for people to experience the training progressions and learn something from this. And, and then we'll just do it for 12 weeks and that'll be it. And then that's all I thought. And we put a lot of thought and care into writing that program. And after a decent amount of marketing to our email list on social media, we launched this thing. It was like a 7-day registration window, 7 days, and then we're shutting it down, and then we're going to let it run for 12 weeks. No intention to make something else in the future. And I think we had 350 people sign up on the first run of it. And I was like, holy, like it's incredible. Like, it worked out to about $65 a month per person who were on this thing. I was like, well, that's a hell of a business. Holy crap. Like, and it was not just the sales that I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I was like, okay, great. That was a one-time fluke. I'll take that money, put it in a rainy day fund. Perfect. Let's get back to coaching individuals. And then the feedback starts coming in. Man, I'm having such like the testimonials, like the people's experience. It was that really fired me up. I was like, damn, people are really. And at about the 8-week mark, when there's 4 weeks left in the program, they're like, Marcus, what the hell am I going to do when this is over? Like, I can't possibly go back to doing the other thing I was doing. I was like, okay, well, I'll write the next 12 weeks. I'll write 2.0. So I wrote that and we launched it again. But 2.0 was only available to the people that finished 1. Everybody else that was now hearing about it had to go through 1. And so on the second launch of this thing, we more than doubled sales. And I was like, oh my God. Like, it freaked me out. I was like, this is nuts. And then the next round again, and the next round again. And it was like, this is going bonkers. And so I was still in this is a fluke. This is not something I can build a sustainable business on. This is totally not my wheelhouse. I'm a gym owner. I'm a personal coach by, my last 10 years or 8 years of experience. Like, I got to just stick to what I know. And then somewhere in like the 1.5 year mark, I really was like, okay, let's really go all in on this thing. It's clearly now over 80% of my total business, not to mention the individual coaching business kept growing as well, because now I had 5 coaches working for me. So they were growing, but the group coaching thing was growing a bit faster. And yeah, we really put not all of our eggs, but we really dedicated a lot of time to scaling that and to making it a better product and servicing people better. And I think I also was far enough removed from my OPEX OPT days where, the mantra was like one coach, one client, one program, which I believed a lot in. It was how I built all my success as a CrossFit Games athlete. I had one coach, we had one program for Marcus, and it was me. It was like that was great. And but I also was always plugged into the group fitness community too, and I believed that there was power in that. And I had kind of turned my back on it a little bit because my business relationship to my CrossFit gym partners went south on me. And so I was like, I got to distance myself from the whole group fitness thing. But I think deep down, like, I knew that there was still value to it. And I was seeing it now firsthand in a big way, connected to principles of training that I deeply believed in. I was like, there's something really, really special here. And I'm not going to look past it, for some kind of like outdated, like dogmatic view of like one coach, one thing, and that's not to say it's wrong. It's just like, it's not the only way. And so that was it.
I feel like there was just a big movement in the CrossFit coaching community at that point in time anyway, moving away from the group classes.
Yes.
And moving towards individualized coaching, and that being put on a pedestal. I even remember in my gym, we started as personal trainers and we opened up a CrossFit gym, and the group environment, the group community was massive. And then around the same time, we started putting a precedence on individual coaching. Basically, would say to everyone, like, well, if you really want to get good, or you really want to be healthy, or you really want to be whatever, fill in the blank, then what you actually need is an individual program. And our community got so divided because you'd have
Yeah.
half the community in a group class and you'd have half the community walking through the group class doing their individual coaching
Yes.
programs, which would be a nightmare. And then we've kind of, like you, went full circle and we're like, no, actually, there's so much beauty in the group stuff, and you can still have the individual stuff, but they're just
Yeah.
kind of different. But I do remember the whole market was moving that way, and perhaps I was biased as well because I'd done the OPEX certification stuff as well, the CCP, and it was also new, so it's exciting. You want to try it,
Yeah, of
and then
course.
yeah, we've kind of come full circle. But can I
Well,
ask,
and
Mark?
and one of the other sorry, just one more thing is that, you know, when something that I was so bought in on and pushing so hard started to break and crack, like the group model was clearly breaking and cracking, and there were things that were becoming evident to us after 3 years that we didn't know at the beginning, or 5 years that we didn't know at the beginning, that were like, oh my God, I don't know how to fix this. The only way I know how to fix this is to try and control all the variables over here. And that was like, I'm going to go this route with individual coaching as opposed to trying to really evaluate how do we fix this model. And it didn't have to be such a wholesale shift. There's a place for both, and we can upgrade this group model dramatically through better programming, through better coaching, and through just different fitness methodologies, right? Like now I think if I brought functional bodybuilding into a group model, it would have a dramatically different outcome than what we had done previously. And it could solve a lot of the challenges that we were facing at that 2017 timeframe, where there was this there were some cracks in the system.
And what have been the challenges, Marcus, going all in with the group stuff with functional bodybuilding, probably moving away from the individual coaching side? Like, how did your business evolve? How did it progress? Did every new program see double in purchases when you started? Surely that's going to drop off.
We're still doubling for
yeah.
It starts to fall. It's when it starts to fall off, you start to see, okay, what are the challenges? What are the problems? And there's many. The challenges that arise as from shifting to a new model were like saying goodbye to an old model and the benefits and the value of having that old model, the one-to-one personal connections, the getting to actually talk to and be with the client. We didn't have a brick and mortar anymore. We weren't, I wasn't seeing customers in person. I didn't have one-to-one clients as many. That's a different type of relationship where you can have a little bit more control of the outcomes for people. And so you kind of put something out there to the group, especially an online training program. It's like, okay, here you go. I'll do my best to help you navigate it correctly. But at the end of the day, people are they're out there doing their thing. And I don't know how they're actually getting to consume the information. So there's less control over the brand, than when you're in person with somebody. But then once you're all in, or once we were all in, it was like, okay, how do you, then it was challenges of scaling, of every step of the way. It was like, okay, we have to hire people. We need more support. We can't do this as just two people. We need a team. We need to develop a media strategy because Marcus can't just film on his camera every day, or on his his phone. That's not working. We need to have a media person. Do we need a media department? Do we need a full-time person? Now we need full-time administration and customer service. And we need to look at software solutions for getting this program into people's hands. And we have to have a more full-scale marketing approach. And then at some point, it's like everybody runs into this challenge where, hey, here's the product, here's what we're doing, and we've exhausted the audience's attention on that product. So we need to make it shift to the product or repackage it or sell it in a new way that gets people excited about it again, because they need to lift weights and eat whole foods for the rest of their life. We just need to make sure that they stay engaged in it, because we're not dealing with robots that you just press the button and they're going to do functional bodybuilding for the next 60 years. They got to feel connected to it. So yeah, all those challenges continue to face even the online fitness training community. And when you're just dealing with maybe a bigger group, then it's just a matter of scale and addressing those challenges that come that you just, when you have a 50-person client list or a 150-person gym, well, that's different than, 2,000 customer list and a 5,000 customer list or a 10,000 customer list. Like you start to see new problems arise that you just never expected.
And how many people in your team now, Marcus?
We've got, I want to say there's 13
Wow.
employees now with, probably 5 to 7 contractors that we work with. So it's quite a few people.
And what's your role?
Um, I mean, I'm still principal decision maker for like the company direction, and I have department heads in, we'll call it operations and in marketing. So they have teams and people that they lead, but I'm there to kind of oversee and bounce ideas off them and meet with them on a regular basis. Mostly, I'm like the head of the training department. I program design, creation, and driving sort of what is functional bodybuilding forward. I'm also, the I am the talent, so to speak, when it comes to media. I'm on camera. I'm the one that's developing a lot of the content, not all of the content. Like my marketing partner Satya has a big role in coming up with content ideas and helping plan and strategize and making the content ideas that I have work better for the actual algorithms and to connect to people's actual emotions and feelings. I got a media producer, somebody who's behind camera and doing a lot of that, but I still am involved in media. So I'm a ton on social media, a lot of content creation, tons of education, and then head of training. And then, everything else that happens in the company, I at some point have to, it all kind of, the buck stops with me, so to speak. Like I have to understand financial reports. I have to look at accounting. I am dealing with legal stuff right now for you know a potential partnership or some new contract that's coming up, so I'm on calls like that. I have to like strategize for growth and for partnerships, like, and not partnerships like business partnerships but media collaborations. Like I want to do something with you know a fitness influencer. I'm reaching out to them or another coach or another brand. Like how can we work together to make something really help each other. uh, so going on podcasts, things like that. It's like a lot of different hats, for sure. But the things that take up the most of my time on an every week basis: making content, video, audio, written, and then writing training programs and essentially refining those programs through a team of testers that I have out there that provide me feedback.
I mean, I've been a part of your mailing list for a very long time, and I would say that it was cool hearing about partnering with this business partner of yours, who's now your business partner, and she encouraging you to start sending out emails. Because I've always thought like, wow, Marcus is so consistent with the content that you get out on email marketing, and obviously social media and stuff is the stuff that everyone sees. But there is a lot of work going on behind closed doors, and I would just say that it just appears from a distance you've been super consistent. So
Yeah,
there's no.
and I think Satya a lot for her support in building that habit. And something that not a lot of people know, perhaps you do, is that before I had this business and I was doing email marketing, like I was a very avid blogger, and I had a very detailed multi-year training life blog that I posted my whole fitness journey through being, through the ranks of competing in CrossFit. And I definitely found a written voice early on through that when I had this other outlet, which was at first social media captions, but then this email list, it just became something that was like, oh, this really feels right and authentic for me. So yeah, I'm happy that took place, and that people like yourself, who have been subscribed for a long time, still see the value in it. And because that's it. It's like I'm not just going to blast you with like a 5 email sequence. It's like, okay, I got 5 emails to get this person to buy, and then they're going to fall off my list. It's like, no, I want to, I'm happy if you buy something. I'm happy if you join my program. And I'm also happy to just keep in touch and keep writing things that, move the needle for you in some way, or just get you are thought provoking.
Awesome. Marcus, I'm very conscious that your time is running out. I think
yes,
the kids are going to be bursting through the door any moment, but there is one topic I'd love to talk about before we wrap this up. And it's in relation to actually a post you just put up recently around body image. And I think at the crux, correct me if I'm wrong, the message was saying that, for years of your life, you had placed a lot of importance on the way that you looked. And perhaps that had stemmed from childhood or teenage years, not being the most ripped person. And that had essentially fueled you through a lot of your adult life. And you had wished that someone had told you earlier that perhaps there was more to health, there's more to life. Could you share, I guess my first question I want to ask is like, what was the catalyst that made you think about posting that?
Well, I mean, I kind of, I was always even through my competitive CrossFit years, especially towards the end, like I was very focused on performance, but I was also, I had a good aesthetic. Like I was one of the leaner athletes out there, and people would comment on that. I wasn't like my personal opinion of myself. It was just that's what people would tell me. But after competing, and specifically in the last 3 years, as was sort of like, it was just sort of triggered by COVID. Was I was doing some work before COVID started with my diet to sort of optimize my digestive health, which had gotten pretty out of whack through the stress of, having a few children back to back that were sleep was off. And there was a number of things that kind of led to that, but I was doing some focus work. So I got really, I would say, maybe just diligent about like recognizing like the foods I was eating. And I even got, for the first time over a decade, I started to like actually like not weigh and measure like with a goal of I'm going to eat this much, but like I started tracking quantities as well as the types of foods, and, doing some elimination stuff. And so that was leading up to COVID. And I was like, my body was starting to shift as a result. It was getting a little bit leaner, which was kind of, it was fun. It was like, but it was more of an experiment of like gut health. And then COVID happened. And, with COVID, like life became basically robotic. It was like, wake up, same thing every day. A lot of people experience this. And for somebody like myself, who's very regimented and programmed, like I was like, okay, I'm going to fall squarely into this. Like, I'm going to eat this way and just be hyper diligent about my diet. And at the same time, my activity level kind of went like, didn't go way up, but it went up a considerable amount. And why was that? Not because I started training more, because I was now parenting full time. Like there was no daycare, there's no preschool, there was nobody watching my kids while I was at work and at the computer. Like I was trading off with my wife, and every day I was walking for like 90 minutes with them in the stroller, and just I was active with them, and still doing a couple, my 4 training sessions a week and riding my mountain bike and doing some things. But like my activity went up. I was getting more regimented about my diet, really deep, like no like cheat days, or I was just like, every day was the same. And I got pretty lean. Like I went from being lean to like ripped in 2020 for the first time, like that ripped since I was in my early 20s. Like I had achieved that level of leanness when I was 21, but I never really cared to try. I never really like focused on getting back to there. And so it happened. And then as a result of that, like a lot of the visual cues that I got in the mirror and on video, and my Instagram like went through like a 200,000 person, boost from like seeing these shredded videos of me in the backyard with the sun on me during COVID, and people are on Instagram all day. And like, there was this whole like kind of confluence of variables that led to me getting kind of attached to like seeing this really, really ripped guy and being lean and being like low body fat percentage, like dry and just shredded and like No, it's not like starving myself. I was eating, I think, 3,800 calories a day, but just moving a shitload and just, anyhow, the catalyst was that 2020 experience bled into 2021 and then into 2022, where I was just like, I don't want to put on body fat because I like the way I'm looking right now. And I think this is making a positive impact on my business. And I'm just getting attached to seeing this guy. And in 2021 and 2022, there were definitely signs of like, hey, I'm not feeling my best. Like my energy's low. I was intermittent fasting in like kind of very strict regimented way that was like impacting my quality of life. And just like, because now we're not in lockdown anymore. We're like going out with friends and we're seeing my parents more. And it's like, oh, I ate my last meal. Like I'm not, like I was like, this is getting a little out of hand, but how do I adjust this? Cause I'm like staring at this body and it looks, I can see things I haven't seen. Like it just got confusing. And kind of just towards the end of middle to end of last year, I was like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty run down and tired of this shit. So I don't know, something's got to give. And so that was just sort of got me thinking about talking about it because I was sort of frustrated with myself for how much I had let this experience, this sort of 2020 sort of change like a big focus for me around food and my body and what I was seeing and what I liked or what I didn't like, and it gotten to a point where I was like, I don't even see this ripped guy anymore, like a little bit of that body dysmorphia. Like I'm not here to like diagnose any of it, but just it was clearly like this is having a negative impact and I can sense it. And how do I, well, one of my best ways is to start talking about it. And then what ways am I going to implement change for myself? Um, but it got me thinking back to when I was 21 and I got super lean and super ripped in college without any knowledge, without any, like I was dangerous with what I knew about how to get lean because it was not a sustainable approach. That was me eating like 2,200 calories and moving like a maniac and getting super depleted and then trying to keep it going. And when the cracks started to show, I just kept going until I broke. And whereas now it's like, okay, well, I've learned how to navigate it over the past 2 years. Like, I'm still making smart decisions. I'm a way healthier individual than I was then, but there's some similarities that get kind of connected to, you know, that feedback of like, I see something and it makes me feel like positive and I want to keep doing things. And then it's like, wait a minute, but there's some things that aren't feeling so good, but how do I disconnect from the good that, it's a game that I think a number of people play. Their circumstances are different, but it's happening.
I think in the same way that you were sharing back in the day your experience with burnout as a CrossFitter and doing something about it, which I think was very much needed and not many people were talking about it. And I think that vulnerability is super powerful to then obviously now see it again in many, many years later in a different part of your life, I think is super powerful as well. I'm interested to hear, after you shared that, have you had people reach out to you? Have you had conversations about people feeling something similar? But yeah, what's the response been like?
Yeah, there's been a lot of the social media responses were, very positive, very relating, like, oh man, that's relatable, and yeah, you got your people that are like, they want to criticize the way I've approached talking about it, but or the way that I portrayed it with certain images or whatever, they'll try and poke holes and like, hey, when you said that line in the video, like you posted a picture where you were pretty ripped, like, and you said you weren't ripped. I'm like, okay, let's just take a step back. Let's look at like what's the message. But yeah, and I always know when there's something that feels really authentic to me, and I'm just like, I just gotta get this off my chest. I want to talk about this. Like, it tends to like land, and hit for people because it's just more real. It's not like I didn't sit down and be like, hey, Satya, like, what can we talk about that's going to get people engaged? Which we have to sometimes. Like, hey, like we want to talk about single leg training. Like, what can we do to like get people like actually fucking stop and look at single leg training, right? Like, um, but yeah, this is not like them.
Nice. Well, I just want to say I really appreciate your vulnerability, and I think that's one of the reasons why I keep on following you and following your journey, because it does feel super real. And every time I do hear you on a podcast or in an interview, it seems like the Marcus that I get to speak to now is the same Marcus as I see on social media. And I think that is, if that's not authenticity in a day and age where there is so much difference between those two, I think for a lot of people, then yeah, I just wanted to share that. I think it's a great thing.
Appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it means a lot, and that's something. If I ever start to hear differently, I'm gonna have to really evaluate what I'm doing as a professional, because that's kind of how I've tried to organize my values around how I'm going to present and what I will be hopefully known for.
Awesome. Marcus, what's the future of functional bodybuilding, and what's the future for you?
Oh man, it's just to take what we've learned, we learned over the past 6 years, what we've built, and the brand, protect it, protect the message, and then amplify it and make sure more people hear it, but never at the cost of, you know, getting away from those values and those principles that we started out with. And yeah, I mean, I'll be 40 in a year and a half, and I look forward to that season of my life, that decade, and really defining what I am going to be like as a husband and a dad, and as a business owner. And um, yeah, I really want. I've been so goal oriented around like, you know, outcomes in fitness and outcomes in business. Um, I've had a process to get there, but I really want to start to have like those types of goals and a process around life experiences with my family and personally, because I've worked super hard for close to 2 decades since I was a college kid and to where I am at today. And I've had amazing experiences along the way, but many of them have happened more as a byproduct of like the hard work and being driven by certain goals in my career and in my sport. And I want to think about, creating powerful uh, experiences for that are driven by the goal of having a connected and really rich family life too. So that's something I'm working on. And I'm still young as a dad. I got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I've got a few years under my belt, but a lot more to learn.
Awesome. Well, Marcus, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for all the
Thank you
sharing.
for having me. My bet. You bet.
Yeah, and obviously just keep up the amazing work. It's so good to see you having such an impact on the industry and I think the world, honestly. Yeah, and I just look forward to seeing where you go and where functional bodybuilding goes and whatever lies ahead, where all that goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.